Hi, we're back. I'm with Jeffrey Cranford, president of Links Players again, and we are moving through our studies in spiritual due diligence, and we're on the third study, the nature of God, and we're on the third lesson, which has to do with God incarnate, God in the flesh, who we know is Jesus Christ. And this is the first of three lessons about Jesus. So let's begin talking about Jesus' life. Jeff, what in Jesus' life stands out for you as really intriguing, say, leading up to the time of his death? We'll look at his death and resurrection later, but leading up to the time of his death, what really jumps out at you as an intriguing aspect or some intriguing aspects of Jesus' life?
Well, one of the most intriguing things to me, and it kind of runs through a lot of the ways in which I teach, is Jesus' awareness of who he was and what his mission was. And he was very consistent with this from the very beginning. He constantly talked to his disciples about going to the cross. He constantly talked to his disciples about that he'd be raised from the dead. He constantly mentioned this, and he always did it in the context of prophecies that had been written about him and about understanding his mission through the Tanakh, or what we would call the Old Testament. And so in John chapter 10, he makes a staggering comment. He said, look, if I'm not, and I'm paraphrasing here, but systematically walking out, if I'm not doing the works of my Father, is how he put it, but if I'm not systematically walking out what's been written about me for now hundreds of years, then do not believe in me. And when I think about the aspects of his life, I was watching him walk in perfect synchronicity with what had been written, and his awareness of that, even down to recognizing on the Passion Week when he's walking into Jerusalem, and we would call it Palm Sunday, and they're all chanting Psalm 118, which is a messianic prophecy. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. What's fascinating to me is he knew that even in the midst of this tremendous picture of glory and the recognition that he's the King and the Messiah of Israel, he's still aware that just a few days from now they're going to be chanting, crucify him, crucify him. And his willingness to go, at just exactly as Isaiah had seen, as a lamb that was willingly going to slaughter in perfect fulfillment of the atonement, that grabs me. That really grabs me. And yet, even in the midst of the Passion Week, as he's moving towards that picture, guess where he spends his time? He doesn't even spend his time with the elite there. He goes back over through the Kidron Valley, up over the Mount of Olives, and back and hangs out with some of the kind of the lowly people, and spends the night there, and then comes back the next day. So what I'm seeing is the Creator all the way through. You ask what aspect? It's his humility, his willingness to die, his willingness to be associated with the lowly, his humility in coming to lay down a perfect life in exchange for my pathetic life, and his willingness to see me as being part of the nations, see me in the future, see me yet in my unformed substance in the earth, the psalmist says, and be willing to lay down his life in advance of me even being born, is staggering. It's staggering to me.
Wow. That's an amazing view of things, because certainly if that was all we knew about Jesus, that he was a man who was sure of his purpose from his childhood forward, we would say, wow, I need some of that. Because so many of us get to multiple points in our life where we say, now what's my life supposed to be about? Now what am I really pursuing now? And he was clear from the beginning right on through it. I like that.
And he wants us, although we're a little bit more on a need-to-know basis, he wants us to have vision. Every single patriarch, there was a promise in the beginning, and then they spent their life in faith waiting for the consummation. And sometimes it wasn't even, they didn't even see the full promise, and they died. And Paul even says, and they're actually dependent upon us now to have their own promise fulfilled in their own way. So I think one of the things that's also staggering about Jesus is his recognition of his mission. And then he superimposes that onto our lives and says, okay, now be cognizant and recognize that there's a mission for you as well. You know, we kind of laugh about the old Blues Brother movie that says we're on a mission from God, and people mock that and laugh at that and think that's ridiculous. But the thing that gives real permanence to life, and I use the expression of what gets me up in the morning, is a recognition that I am on a mission, and that is something that Jesus gave us the template for that as well through his life. I'm on a mission, I understand my purpose, and I'm willing to walk into everything that God has for me. And then he then takes that before he's ascended to the right hand of the Father, and he gives that back. We call it the Great Commission that he gives to his disciples, and we're still walking in that mandate that I have given you gifts, I've given you purpose, I've given you a destiny, I've given you meaning, and I'm going to give you a community to walk it out with. I'm going to send people along, and you're going to develop tremendous friendships and close relationships with men and women that I'm going to send into your life to help fulfill this. You'll play an integral role in in their life, and they'll play one in your life, and then you'll export this message of the kingdom into other people's lives. And if Jesus didn't play his role, that would have never occurred. And his awareness of the fact that he was the seminal moment in really unleashing this missional life into billions of people around the world, and his willingness to undergo it, even though he didn't deserve any of it, is for me staggering and makes me want to worship him. I mean, that's what makes me want to worship him, is that he didn't have to do any of that. He could have stayed. They could have wiped out the earth, you know, like they did during the time of Noah. He could have just wiped us out and started over because of the failure. And yet he didn't do that in my life, and he doesn't do that in your life, and he didn't do that in anyone that would just be willing to follow his pattern.